questions initially from one of the professors on M2M. Now, M2M is all based on MQTT protocol.
Okay, yes,
Whatever is strictly IoT, yes, we will do dedicated, on that.
yes. Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure. I guess we can start, Patel sir.
Yes, yes, we can start. Rajeshri madam, you can start recording.
And once again, if somebody can confirm that my audio, video, and the deck is visible.
Yes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So this particular session, we are going to have one more member in addition to audio, video, and deck. That's going to be my second camera because we are going to do some hands-on here. So for this session, please observe what we are doing. You don't need to do it side by side, even if you have the equipment. I'm going to do this a couple of times, and I'm going to share videos which you can follow afterwards to do it on your own. So that's the second camera I have. Right, so let's get started. Thanks everybody. I hope the session before this introductory, I tried to lay a foundation for this entire FDP, and particularly I wanted to get the background covered. And everything from now on, we are going. You saw that there's a foundation layer and 4 pillars. Every session from now on is going to be dedicated to one of those subjects. Right now, let me start by showing you what all those subjects are going to be. As I said, today in today's age, right, everything is based on the notion of building blocks. People want more and more reusability. People want more and more standardization. People want more and more application. People don't want to invent the same thing repeatedly. To be honest, our company has followed this from the beginning. Where we are beating our competition is most of our competition is doing programming for each of them for every client. We have all the ingredients already built. And for a particular solution, we just arrange them in a different way. So I'm going to try and this is not secret. We are very open with our technical approach. So I'm going to try and translate some of that architecture into these building blocks for us. Okay, so these are the 5 building blocks of IoT that we use. Now, see again, once this, a lot of the time this becomes subjective. Google will give you an article which says 12 building blocks also. These 5 we have identified is these 5 are of such a nature that you could implement each of these differently. If you have a solution with these 5 building blocks, you could pluck out the data, bring in some other kind of data implementation, it will still work. So I have tried to visualize this in such a way that each is a unit of architecture, right? As I said, architecture is the key thing. If we can understand the architecture, everything else gets built easily. Okay, so these are the 5 building blocks, and the leftmost is closest to the physical world, and is more, where hardware is more dominant. As you go towards the right, things will start getting more and more software dominant, and things will start getting more and more towards functionality and the user. Okay, so the leftmost is embedded, which is all about the microcontroller and what it is doing in the real world. Then the embedded layer needs to speak to the cloud to certain communication channels. That is the second building block, communications. And trust me, we have seen the distributed architecture. Communication is the make or break layer where systems succeed or fail. Okay, I'll give you some very good examples also to bring this point home. So we'll spend almost 2 sessions talking about communication. Then orchestration. Now this word may seem new to you, but when I explain it, you will realize you already know what it is. It is called middleware. Why it is called orchestration is it choreographs the actions of all other layers. Okay, it orchestrates. So what should happen next? What all errors are possible after A, B, and C? What are the branching possible? So all that brain of an operation is called orchestration. All right, it's a very standard architectural terms. The terms I'm using are coming from technology architecture bodies. TOGAF is one of the biggest certifications. So if you can remember these terms, you will be aligned with what the international architecture bodies use. Very important to have the language right. All right. After orchestration, then there'll be a data element where do we store all the tons and tons of data that the system produces. Data is what humans need out of IoT. And finally, we can't read data line by line. People are much better at reading images than reading textual data. we'll talk about visualization. These are the 5 layers. Now, once these 5 layers are built, as I said, we need, and this will be how this workshop will also progress. We need a protocol layer to tie. So remember, protocol is Fevicol. We need Fevicol to glue these together into a solution. So we'll talk about that all through these sessions. Once this is there, system can be built, no worries. But there's a difference in building something in the lab, and there's a difference in building something from an industrial perspective. So we will take a look at the industry tools and practices through which we can make things very robust, very rapidly, and very reliably. So triple R, robust, rapid, and reliable. We will see how to do using industry parlance. And at the end of it, we will be in a position to create the entire solution. This is the pyramid we are gonna build. All right. First building block closest to the physical layer, the edge layer is our embedded layer. All right. That's what these 90 minutes are for. Here there are 3 things we'll focus on: breadboarding, prototyping a solution, and how do you use a microcontroller. Now, to be honest, this is always a dilemma in my mind that when I'm speaking with a community, a faculty community, many of you might even have PhDs in some of these subjects. So at the beginning only, let me put a disclaimer that I'm going to use this as a refresher session for our community. For some of you, this may be, daily bread and butter stuff. Please feel free to add your inputs if you want to add your expertise to it. Some of us, you might not be in practice, so use it as a refresher session. My aim is through you, I want to translate this to the student community. All right. So let's get started with embedded. All right. And even within that, breadboarding. Now, one of my constant complaints is when we get interns or when we get students, they have done very little breadboarding. So I focus a lot on all these trainings, be it any forum for any audience. I start with breadboarding. It's a very, very good way to get started with IoT. All right. Now, again, there's a difference between an embedded system and an IoT system. We will take a look at it after we have covered the embedded aspects. All right. So before we start building embedded, we'll do a very, very rapid, like a very fast paced review of what all principles we'll be using. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
There's some participants are saying that one of the participants is saying that there is no voice, no audio.
Anybody else? People are generally you are able to hear me, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. No issue.
Yeah, we are able to hear. We are able to hear.
Okay.
The voice is clear.
And what about video?
Sir, video is also
It's also
Video
fine.
is also perfectly fine.
Sir, everything is clear.
yes, sir. Everything is clear.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much. At times there's a temporary lag in the network. It will get resolved. If it's not there for too long, I would suggest we reconnect. I have had to do that a couple of times this morning as well. So, but sure, let me know if it is a widespread outage. Right. So in the beginning, let me cover some very fundamental stuff. This may look very basic, but trust me, my team uses these things every day in our lab. All right. So let's do a very basic review of components we'll be using in this embedded session. First and foremost, there's the concept of what's a circuit. I'm sure we are all aware what's a circuit. The important thing about a circuit is many times we think that our Ohm's law formula, V is equal to I into R, we forget about it after we learn it in first year. Trust me, I've had to revisit this formula any number of times. My team uses it every day to compute, what the circuit should do. This morning I had a trouble. I'm building a system for an office where we have to measure how much kilowatts they are using on an hourly basis. So I had to again revisit it this morning again. So very important formula, even though it is very, very fundamental to what we do, right? So there are 2 kinds of circuits we'll be using. We'll be using the series circuits in our hands-on, where all the load elements are aligned in sequence and the same current passes through all of them. We will also be using the parallel circuits in our hands-on, where current will be branched off through different load elements. All right. Once you get to building an IoT device, by that time we'd have already finished the circuit design. So all of this is relevant when you're designing a circuit before we go on to the code elements. All right. What kind of components we'll be using in the hands-on in this session? some very basic stuff. There will be resistor, diodes, LEDs. We'll always remember that there are certain things which have a polarity. For example, one of the reasons that sometimes circuits go wrong is we forget that LED has a plus and a minus terminal. We'll use simple switches. We will use batteries. And we will, for some of our practicals, when we get to sensors, one of the simplest sensors I can bring to you today is the LDR, the light dependent resistor, through which we will compute or we will sense the intensity of light coming onto our board. All right. So these are very basic. These are the things we'll be using to give a demonstration of breadboarding, a quick refresher of breadboarding. Then onwards, when we start about integrating stuff with the microcontroller, we'll be using some more stuff. We'll be using an NPN transistor. We'll be using relays to control devices. If you remember, I showed you a full-blown IoT device this morning. So this also makes use of relays very heavily. So relays is primarily the thing I use the most in our IoT devices. All right. And we'll be using motors towards the end of this FDP. OK. We have been speaking about M2M couple of times since morning. So most of our demonstrations in M2M would be a sensing machine talking to a motor, because it's very easy to visualize the motor being controlled by the other machine. Right. So let's do a very rapid review of a breadboard. I think what I'll first show you the slides and then we'll move on to the actual breadboard and have some discussion around it. Right. So breadboard is essentially, the full name is solderless breadboard. What happens is, just give me a moment. Yogesh, can you bring me a zero board, please? Zero board, which has something soldered on it. So what happens is, normally when we are just getting started with designing a new circuit, we start with the breadboard, because if you make a mistake, if you want to reconfigure and measure whether we have the actual current passing through it or not, a breadboard is a solderless entity. You just stick in the components and it just works, right? After that, after the breadboard, what you do is called prototyping, in which case you have something like this. There's a zero board where you put the components on one side and you solder them at the other side when they are through hole components. So this becomes like semi-permanent. If you make a mistake, it's much more costly. It's much more effort to rectify a mistake. That's why we build a breadboard. So first stage, when we are talking about building IoT devices, so first stage is we do a breadboarding exercise. Once we have a desired circuit, we move that onto this kind of a perforated board. This is called a prototype board. And once we are happy with the prototype board, we move it onto the printed circuit board, which is the full and final commercial production version of your circuit. All right. So in this session, we are going to focus on breadboard. Now, very quickly, there are two sets of power rails. So there are power rails here, first power rail and the second. The use of power rails is that you can just give a particular voltage at one end and you can tap into it using wires from anywhere else from that power rail. So typically there's a plus and minus here, a plus and ground here, and another plus and ground here. Why there are two power rails is, many times, in fact, most of the times, our circuits are going to have more than one voltage level. All right. So you might have, for example, the microcontroller we have been using, Node MCU is a 3.3 volt system, right? This one, we'll look at it more closely towards the second half of this session. And you might have a 5 volt relay there. So you need both 3.3 and 5 volts on the same breadboard, which is why you have at least two power rails. All right. Now the power rails are all connected internally. This entire series of nodes is 1 voltage. However, there are other rails here where you're going to put your components. It might be a transistor, it might be a diode, it might be an integrated chip. So here, each of these vertical lines up to this place, these are all at the same voltage. They are connected through nickel wires inside. All right. So all of these are the same voltage. OK, there is a gap in the middle where you put your ICs, the DIP, dual inline package ICs. So this pin and this pin are not really connected. OK, otherwise your legs of the IC will become short circuited. Right. So to give you an example of how we assemble, let's say we just want to light an LED. Now you'll remember that we, yes, sir.
Can you just wait, because what has happened is some of the participants have used some other link and looks like they have joined some other session. So parallelly, one more session is going on.
Oh, all right.
Because I can see one of the participant has shared his desktop, where Mr. Mandeep Singh, then Rajeshwar Rao, Chamundeshwari, Dr. J. Ranga, these have joined some session, but I can't see them in this session.
Oh, all right.
So it looks like they must have used some morning session and
probably.
Is
So
Vijesh there in this group?
Sessions are recorded. They would see another time.
Yes, I know. But I want to confirm because is Vijesh there in this group? Mr. Vijesh.
I can see Vijesh in the attendees list here.
Mr. Vijesh, can you just speak?
He has messaged on the WhatsApp.
Yes.
I was finding some trouble because of this link is not working, but I just restart my computer and then it start working.
Okay. So everything is fine now?
Yeah, yes, everything is fine.
Well. Okay. Thank you. Abhijit, continue.
Sir, should I repeat some sections or should I continue from where we are?
No, this is just basic electronics, so most of them know it.
Perfect. Just a refresher. All right.
Abhijit? Your video quality is very poor. And when you are showing your circuit and display something in front of camera, it is totally blurred to us. So it is not.
Hold on. Let me check that. Is this clear to you?
No, it's a very blurred.
No, sir.
It's very clear.
It's clear. I think it's the internet issue, sir, but it's clear for all of us.
It will clear, sir. No issue. Just like this, you have to see that one. We cannot make more clarity. Because
I think he might be having bandwidth issue.
Much more clear, sir. I don't know. It is very clear this side.
It is clear.
It's very clear, sir.
Very clear, sir. Very clear.
Very clear at our end.
So probably it's being deterred because of bandwidth issues.
Very clear, sir.
Great. What you can do, Jitendra sir, is you can maybe shut off the incoming video. That will make sure that you have more bandwidth for the presentation elements.
Okay. Yeah. Some bandwidth will be required for that device.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Right. So shall we continue?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So just as a quick refresher, so how do we use this board? We'll remember that LEDs will it's always best to attach LEDs to resistors. So you take a resistor from the positive lead, attach it all the way here. Then since all of this is the same voltage, you attach the positive lead of the LED, stick it in here, and the cathode, the negative lead of the LED you put into the ground. Of course, none of it will work unless you have a battery placed between plus and minus. And that's when the voltage will get supplied. All right. So very quick refresher of the breadboard. Now let's start building some circuits. And I always start with the simplest circuit that we can think of, which is just put a LED out there with a switch in the middle. So it becomes, if you've not used the breadboard for a long time, it will become clear. So I also started when I got into IoT, I started using breadboards after many years, and it took me some time to get my bearings. So let me help you with that. So, and I'll tell you when we work here, when we assemble our IoT devices, how do we, what process we follow for breadboarding, I will share that with you. So there's a very simple circuit. The first and foremost thing we do is we draw this kind of circuit by hand, or we use some kind of simulators. I will show you a simulator as well. So it's a very simple circuit. It just has 4 components. It has a power source, in the direction of the current. Then you have a 330 ohm resistor. So anything below 400 ohms is going to be fine, but do have some resistor, otherwise the LED will get burnt out. So when I do workshops, I always carry tons and tons of LEDs, because invariably many participants forget to use the resistor and then the LED just burns out. So then you got and then it goes to ground, and there's a switch in the circuit. So what we do is I'm going to switch off my video so that we can focus on the breadboard video for now. So this is what we have on the breadboard. As I've indicated, hold on. All right. So if one of you can confirm that my breadboard is clearly visible.
It's visible, sir. It's clear.
Yes.
Perfect. So as we said, there are two sets of rails. This is one and this is the other. We start out by putting a power source. For this practical, we use the battery. But once we move on to microcontroller base, we use the microcontroller itself as the power source. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the power leads. The red one will be the anode. So the color convention is quite important here because many times if you don't follow the right color convention, the troubleshooting of network becomes very difficult. All right. So all we have done right now is we have put the power source in play and the rails are now carrying the voltage. Now let's see what all we do. We go back to our circuit. There's the first step is we draw the circuit. The second step is what we say we collect the BOM or bill of materials. What that means is what all we need batteries, we need resistors, we need diode, we need a switch. Why this is important is this prevents us from running around a lot around the lab every time we remember a new component. So basically we get all the BOM items in one place and certify that yes, we have everything we need, right? We are going to use the right colored cables because as I said, it helps with the troubleshooting a lot. Okay, so red cable for the power and black for the ground. So let's very quickly assemble a circuit here. What we'll do is if you look at the circuit, it's just one loop here. So we'll start from the anode and we'll go around the circuit and put all of it together, right? So starting with the positive terminal, we will just stick the red cable terminal in there, put it anywhere else on rest of the rails. Then remember we want a 330 ohm resistor. Anything more than 500 and your LED will not get enough current to glow. We put the 330 ohm resistor in the same line, right? As you can see here, there's a continuity from the positive terminal to the red wire, to the red wire to the resistor terminal. And we plug it into another of the terminals on the breadboard. From here, we get to an LED. As you can make out, LED has one of the legs longer. That is your anode. That is the positive leg of the LED. I just hold it so it is clearly visible. Okay, so longer one is positive. The longer one we'll put in the same rail which has the resistor and shorter one anywhere else. And the final leg of the circuit is connect the shorter one to here. Okay, so it glows because I have not put any switch in the circuit yet. Okay, I can make it slightly nicer by taking this out. Put a switch between the negative rail and ground. And now the light glows when you press the switch, doesn't glow when you don't press the switch. Very simple circuit, ridiculously learning stuff, but I always like to start with this one. Quick review. There's a power source. Power source is feeding the positive rail on 9 volts. From there we draw current and feed it to the resistor. The resistor other end connected to the anode of the LED. Cathode of the LED goes to the switch. Other terminal of the switch goes to ground, and thereby when you press the switch, LED works. When you release it, it doesn't work. So this is how we generally use a breadboard. One important note about the multiple power rails: if your system is going to be a multi-voltage thing, what you should do is let the red rails remain on, let's say, 5 volt and 9 volt, and we need to have what is called as a common ground. Okay. If you don't have a common ground in your breadboard, your circuits will not work. So even if you are using different voltages, you should always have a common ground. Okay, just connect the grounds to each other. Right. So this is extremely simple. Now let's do something useful with this. So the next circuit we'll build is going to be a more useful circuit. We will build a dark detector, all right, which will detect the darkness versus light. All right. Once again, let's follow the steps. The first and foremost, what we do, we draw the circuit out, right? So this is the circuit. It's a very common circuit. We get it all over the place. This looks very simple, but to be honest, we built a lot of motion sensors, which use whether there's light outside or not. This is exactly the same circuit we use. So it's a very, very commercial grade circuit here, right? So what all we need a few things. There are two loops here. In the first loop, you have from the positive terminal of the battery, the first loop is what is called a voltage divider, as you will recognize it. Goes through a 100 kilo ohm resistor, goes through an LDR and goes back to ground, right? What this does is when there is no light falling on the LDR, the only resistive path, only transmittive path is this, and very low current goes through this. As soon as light falls on the LDR, its resistance drops and more current goes through the base of the resistor. That's the second loop. Suddenly you will find more current is flowing through the LED, so it glows, right? So let's put this in action. What we will do is, let me show you the camera again. Let's collect the bill of materials first, right? I'm going to take all of this out. I'm not repeating these experiments because all of you are very well familiar with this. This is just laying the groundwork. Okay, so what all do we need? Once again, we are an LED. We are going to need two different resistors here, right? We are going to need a 330 ohm resistor for the LED, and you're going to need a 100 kilo ohm resistor for the voltage divider. In addition, we are going to need an NPN transistor. We happen to use BC547B. It's a very popular workhorse transistor that is used very widely in almost most of the embedded circuits that we have seen. All right, and we are going to need a light dependent resistor. Okay, so let's put the circuit together. As I said, we follow the loops one by one. First of all, we are going to put the lower loop in place. How do we do that? All right, so once again, you have the positive terminal in place. We are going to put the 100 kilo ohm resistor between the positive terminal and any other terminal here. All right, then we are going to complete this loop. We are going to put the LDR on that rail, and the other leg of the LDR is going to go to ground. So let me just quickly walk through this. This is the positive terminal, 100 ohm resistor, LDR connected. This is the common node. LDR leg goes on to the ground, right? So one path is complete. The other path goes through LED, through a transistor, back to ground. Okay. Now, do remember, folks, that every transistor, every component may have a different pin out. In this particular thing, the sequence of legs happens to be a collector, base, emitter. As you hold the flat face of the transistor towards yourself, not all transistors have the same pin out. We'll talk about data sheets in just 1 minute from now, which tells you which legs do what. Okay, so coming back to complete this circuit for now, we are going to put the transistor in the middle. All right, so base of the transistor is connected to the junction of your resistor and the LDR. You are going to have an LED in place. LED goes from the collector of the transistor to the positive terminal of the battery through a 330 ohm resistor. All right, now that just leaves one leg we need to connect. If you go back to the circuit, you will see we have just completed this part, this path. This goes to the transistor. The base is connected to the right place. Emitter needs to go back to the ground. So we find out where the emitter is. Here it is, connected to the ground. Now, this is the point where the LED should glow, but it's not. But anyways. Hold on. Where is my mobile phone? I'm going to try and put some light on it. Yeah, so I made the same classic mistake I was telling you about. I plugged in the LED in the reverse way. So, all right. So now as you can see, without any optical input, your LED is glowing. So it's a light detector. When there is light around, the LED glows. What I'm going to do is I'm going to bring my mobile torch near the LDR. As you can see, the closer I bring the light source, the dimmer the LED happens. All right. When I take it away, the LED glows. When I bring it close, the LED extinguishes. Right. So this circuit we use many times when you are doing motion detector plus automatic street lights, etc. Very popular circuit. Good part is the same circuit you can use as a reverse, as a dark detector. If you just replace the positions of the 100K resistor and the LDR, it will become a dark detector. So the light will come on when there is dark and go out when it is daylight. One more variation you can try here. Instead of a fixed resistor, you can put a potentiometer, a pot, which is a variable resistor. By that, you can change the sensitivity of the circuit, which means that how much light do you need for the circuit to work or for the light to glow. All right. So that is pretty much it. Once you do it a couple of times, it becomes second nature. It becomes very easily. But that was a very, very quick and dirty hands-on on a quick refresher on how to use a breadboard. Why I've done it this way is the next few assignments are going to involve a microcontroller on a breadboard, and you're going to attach the sensors and actuators to it and do real IoT stuff. So this is all preliminary to that. All right. So let me switch on my camera again. All right. Okay, so I'm back. Right. So let's talk about what else. This is a refresher on breadboarding. Before I move away from breadboarding, I would like to share a very good tool that you can use for simulating it, especially now that our students are in so many different places, right? You might need an online version where you can teach this stuff, especially for first and second years. I think they have this stuff in their subjects. So what I would recommend is I've been using a simulator here called Tinkercad quite successfully. Some of you may have used it before. So for some of you, this may be new. So I would like to introduce you to the simulator. This is all online. This doesn't work too well in IoT simulation, but wherever you need an embedded simulation, you can use this. For example, you'll have to create an account here. It's free, but once the account is there, you can do nice things with it. For example, you can say, I want a battery here. All right. That battery you can attach to the negative rail and the positive rail. Let's say I want to bring in an LED. So if you just put it here and hover your mouse, it will show you which one is the positive and which one is the negative terminal. So let's put this here. Let's put the LED here. Let's connect the LED now through cables. So the positive rail I'm going to connect to and the negative rail to the negative terminal, right? When you want to run this circuit, there's a simulator button at the top. You can click here and you can see that the LED burnt out because I did not put a resistor here, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this rail. I'll show it again if you missed it. If you look at that, it shows a red fire-like icon here, which means I've burnt out the LED. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this. I'm going to bring a resistor here. I don't want code. I want a resistor. Let's make it a 330 ohm resistor. Let's put it out here. We'll turn it around a little bit. Oh, there it goes. Oh, this one is the rotation. let's make it 330 ohms. Let's connect it. All right, now if I run the simulation, it will work fine. What is wrong with this? Oh, this is not connected. Yeah, it's not connected. It should work fine now. Still something wrong? It's all right. So as you can see, I've just shown you a simple one. What you can do is a lot of embedded stuff you can also do on an Arduino board, right? So this is a particularly good simulator because you can do Arduino and the related family of chips simulation on this, right? So really good educational tool for us as well as our students. Right. So a while ago I spoke about data sheets, right? Let me give you a couple of examples. So whenever we start using any bits of the embedded ecosystem, one of the first thing we use, even if it's a small transistor or it's a full-blown Raspberry Pi, we look at the data sheet first. Okay, data sheet tells you a lot of important things. Some of the most important ones are, if it's a microcontroller, it tells you, you know, what is the current and voltage tolerance of microcontrollers. Let me show you an example data sheet there. Yeah. So all you go is you just type in the name of the thing, Node MCU datasheet, and you'll get the PDF variants of that. And it tells you a lot of useful stuff. Similarly, it goes for transistors also. What is the pin out, which pin does what, etc. So I would say that it's a good practice to follow for ourselves as well for our students, that whenever we pick up a new kind of component, the first thing we should look at is the data sheet. So it tells you, you know, how much current it can consume, what is the power utilization, etc., etc. What is the temperature grading for it? All of this, right? How much electromagnetic induction it can sustain. So it's always a good place to start for starting to design circuits. Similarly, I'll show you a simple one also for the transistor we have just used, BC547. Now this mistake our folks do many times, that they lose track of what pin is collector and what pin is emitter. So every transistor might have a different pin out. So all that stuff, the first thing we should do is first port of call should be our data sheets for those components. All right, and these are very readily and freely available. All right, so let me go back to our deck. Simulators we have just seen, data sheets also we have just seen. So this is where we will halt our work on breadboards, and we will talk about microcontrollers for a bit. All right, and there's a very common question we get, that between microcontrollers and microprocessors, what is what and everything. So very quick primer for this stuff, because the entire edge layer, in the previous session we have seen that the edge layer is the bridge between the physical world and the virtual world, and this edge layer is entirely dependent upon microcontrollers. Right, so let's take a very quick look at microcontrollers, also called MCUs, microcontroller units. Now, if you have used any of these today, you have used a microcontroller. Many times we don't think about it this way. Your washing machines, your car display units, your Fitbit bands, your RFID scanners, everything internally is basically dependent upon microcontrollers, right? So there's no end. They're much more prolific than microprocessors or mobile phones or computers, etc. They are the most prolific kind of computers we have been using for many decades now. All right. So why we use it? Whenever our use case, our problem description covers interacting with the real world, either sensing the real world or changing the real world, right? We are dependent upon microcontrollers. All right. And just to cover the point, how they are different from microprocessors, the biggest point of difference between them is a microcontroller is an entirely self-contained entity, right? If you have a microprocessor, an Intel-based processor, if you bring in, then you have to attach a lot of accessories to it for it to be able to interact with things like keyboards or memories or mouse or outside sensors, right? However, a microcontroller is a self-contained computer and which is designed to work with the physical world. And it also relates to the other major difference between them. A microcontroller is designed to do just one job. Okay, whereas a microprocessor, be it a laptop or a Raspberry Pi or a mobile phones, it's a common experience that you put all kinds of apps. It can do your phone calls, it can do messages, it can do WhatsApp, it can do banking, it can do a lot of different types of things. Okay, microcontrollers on the other hand are designed to do one and only one thing. Okay, which is why it's a very common happening that microprocessors need an operating system. It could be Linux, it could be Android, it could be Apple OS, it could be Windows, it could be something else, it could be Symbian. Okay, the operating system makes sure that the underlying hardware talks to the user inputs through that channel. For microcontrollers, however, there is no operating system. Whatever program we put on the microcontroller becomes its operating system. Okay, so when people are used to doing C programming or Java or Python programming, they are always confused that what is the operating system? What do I need to put on the microcontroller first before I can put a blinking LED program? The truth is your blinking LED program itself becomes the operating system. So your code talks to the hardware directly. These are the major differences between a microcontroller and a microprocessor, right? So processors are more general purpose.
Please revise microprocessor and microcontroller bit, please.
Sorry, is there a request to repeat the previous slide?
Yes sir. Because still there is थोड़ा confusion कुछ बना रहता है तो sir please.
No problem.
Microcontroller के बारे revise कर दीजिए.
Absolutely, this is a very common misconception, so I'm happy to address it. Right. So first and foremost, microcontrollers are much simpler devices. The major difference is that the job of a microcontroller is to fulfill just one activity. If the microcontroller is, supposed to show you the dashboard of your motorcycle, that's all it's going to do all its life. You're not going to be installing WhatsApp onto your motorbike microcontroller. It has just one purpose in life. That is why the code that we put on a microcontroller is very specifically coded to do that. Let's say we have a microcontroller which we are coding to control your water pump. It's going to have a very specific function. It will have a relay, and the code will say whenever you press the button, activate the relay. When you don't press the button, deactivate the relay. And for all the life of that purpose, microcontroller is not going to do anything else. Compare that to your mobile phone. It has an operating system. It will have different applications at different points of time. You can stop one app, start another app. So it is a much more general purpose piece of computing. All right. So because it is so general purpose and so complicated, it needs an operating system. We don't want to write code that directly controls your mobile phone. However, a microcontroller does very, very simple things. A microcontroller, your code is going to be like 20 lines of code, 30 lines of code, 10 lines of code, where we will directly either switch on a pin, switch off a pin, read some input, etc., etc. So your code directly talks to the underlying machine. All right. There is no operating system. Whatever program you upload to your controller becomes its operating system, and it will only run one program at a time. You cannot switch between programs. So, and to do that, it is specifically built to integrate. It has a lot of I/O pins so that you can connect it to the real world. You can attach sensors, you can attach actuators, you can attach buttons, etc., etc. Microprocessor does not have a lot of I/O capability facing outwards. You have to attach it registers, you have to attach it extra things, etc., etc., for it to be interfaced with the physical world. So in a way, two distinctions stand out. When we want to do stuff in the real world, physical world, microcontrollers are the solution. They are built for that. When you want to do a lot of computing, which is inwards facing, you want to create databases, you want to build websites, you want to do other stuff, which is entirely bits and bytes, microprocessors is typically the choice. And you can build 100 different programs on the same microprocessor. A microcontroller will run the same program throughout its life. All right. Is that clearer, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Perfect. Now, in this case, there are generally two questions people ask. Is my mobile phone a microcontroller or a microprocessor? Right. So the answer is it has both. It has a lot of sensors. So typical mobile phone today has about 35 sensors. Okay, there are apps. I will share some apps maybe tomorrow's session where you can see what those sensors are doing. Okay, for example, if you hold your phone close to your ear, its screen switches off. If you take it a few inches away, the screen comes back. So there's a proximity sensor there. There's sound sensors. If you hold your phone like this, there's a gyro sensor inside which will detect the orientation. So there are 35 at least sensors in modern phones. So there is a microcontroller in there. However, its primary purpose is computing. That's why the main thing inside it is a Qualcomm or something microprocessor. All right, the microprocessor controls the microcontrollers. So a phone is primarily as a processor. All right. The second question I get is, what about the Raspberry Pis? Raspberry Pi has a very advanced processor. It has 4 core. So this Raspberry Pi I'm showing you on the camera right now, it is called Model 3B Plus. It has a 4 core processor, 4 separate computing cores inside it. At the same time, you will see it has 40 IO pins. So this seems to defy the logic, right? That a microprocessor should not be controlling. Primarily, your Raspberry Pi is a microprocessor. It is no different than any other Linux computer. You can cluster it. You can run websites on it. You can create supercomputer clusters out of hundreds of Raspberry Pis. So primarily, it is a microprocessor. It does have a lot of pins because it was built to teach IoT to communities. Okay, so it does have good IO support, unlike most microprocessors, but this is not a controller. This is a microprocessor. All right. So to give you an idea, when my laptop is not available to me, I connect my television to my Raspberry Pi and I take meetings on the Raspberry Pi. So it is no different than what a laptop can do. All right. Okay, so we've covered the differences between these two. Now let's look at the different form factors. So again, the primary purpose of a microcontroller is to sit inside your other appliances. Your microcontrollers sit inside your bike, behind your headlight. If you're doing machines, it's sitting behind the button panel. So you'll find microcontrollers will come in all kinds of shapes and sizes, all the way from 3 centimeters, 4 centimeters or bigger. I think the one that I just showed you, this is one of the biggest microcontrollers I've seen. This is the Atmel 325P, the one which sits inside the Arduino board. All right, to all the way where you can see on the right hand side, much smaller than a penny coin. Okay, because it's going to be embedded inside something else, right? If some of you are wearing your Fitbit bands right now, it can't host a big microcontroller. So it hosts smaller things. Okay. Right. Let's talk about sensors and actuators, because that's the very reason why we are using microcontrollers. So sensors are things that sense your environment without changing it. For example, what is the temperature? What is the humidity? Is there a Wi-Fi network here? Correct? What is the water level? So all these are sensing of your environment, right? And actuators are things that change your environment. For example, relays. Using a relay, you switch an appliance on or off. For example, heating coils will change the environment, it will make it hotter. There will be motors, right, which will convert electrical energy into mechanical energy. So all those things are called actuators. All right. So sensors and actuators. How do we use it is, sensor doesn't have processing power of its own. Sensor is just physics. All right. For example, a motion sensor is 2 very close bars of copper, right? And whenever there's something nearby, one of the bars expands more than the other, and their relative resistance changes. And that relative change in voltage we feed to a pin of the microcontroller. Okay, so by itself, the sensor can't do much. It's just response to physical stimulus, right? And what we do is, using the microcontroller, we measure that stimulus and take an action. So we'll be looking at, towards the end of this session, I'll be showing you some different sensors, how to integrate them. We'll do a practical demo and that will make it clearer. But essentially an embedded system does this. All right. What an embedded system does is connect sensors or actuators to the IO pins of a microcontroller. The microcontroller is running certain code and that code controls what the sensor and actuator does. So sensor actuator, plus a microcontroller plus some embedded code. This is what we call together as an embedded system. All right. Reminder, we are still not talking about IoT. We are just talking embedded systems. Why it is called embedded? Because this thing is going to sit inside something else. The computer by itself is not your end goal. The computer in the form of a microcontroller is going to measure your speed or measure a temperature or switch on a motor or something else. So it's always going to be embedded somewhere else. So the code we write on a microcontroller is called embedded code. The microcontroller with the code with sensors and actuators is called an embedded system. All right, so those are a few definitions that we have just discussed. Time is 15:20. Okay, so some simple projects we normally give to our students to build. I would just like to demonstrate that to you. And this is a good example where this is just an Arduino where the sensors are LDRs that we have just seen in the previous project that I showed you. So there are 4 LDRs in 4 different directions, and those detect that and what direction there's maximum sunlight. And there's an actuator, which is a stepper motor, which turns the solar panel towards maximum sunlight. All right. So it's a very good project. This has a lot of practical uses. So this is an entire embedded system. It doesn't require any external stimulus. All right. I'll just let the video complete. So as you see, the sensor is driving the actuator to move the solar panel in the direction of maximum light. So this is a very backyard project that our students can do. However, this have immense practical utility. I will show you what we can do with this. Now, a while ago, I visited a solar farm near Pune, and this is exactly the notion, exactly the mechanism that gigawatt solar farms use to get maximum output out of their solar panels as well, right? Of course, they're using a much more robust and industrial variant of the sensors and of the motors and everything. But basically, whatever we do in a small scale, exactly same thing we replicate in an embedded system with much more standardized industrial sensors. So as you see on the screen, this is a gigawatt plant, always making sure that you get maximum output from the plant. All right. So this is what microcontrollers are about. They are all about the real world. We are not talking about building websites or building databases. We are talking about controlling things around us. Okay. Right. Talking more specifically about IoT, this all the demos we'll be doing for IoT embedded work is going to be this microcontroller. This image comes out of the data sheet, which tells you what all pins you have to use. You have, the GPIO pins, which allow you to connect sensors and actuators to your microcontroller. You have analog pins. Right now, there's a difference. A general purpose digital input output is stuff that is going to be only high or low. You'll either have 3 volts on it or a ground on it. Okay, it's a very binary thing. Like whether a button is pressed, okay, or whether the door is open or closed, things like that. So we'll be talking real world now because we are talking IoT. The analog sensor doesn't just do yes or no. For example, you want to measure current. So let me show you the sensor we use for that. So this sensor is rated up to 100 amps. Okay, it's going to feed 1 volt to the processor. From 0 volt to 1 volt in equal proportion, you will have a measure of 0 amps to 100 amps current. Okay, so this is not yes or no. This is not 0 or 1. You feed this kind of thing to an analog input, which converts the incoming values into multiple levels. Okay, how many levels are we having here? It's a 8-bit controller, right?
8-bit
256 levels. So based on what value the analog pin gives you, you can convert to how much current is actually flowing. 10-bit. Okay. So basically, difference between 2 kinds of inputs is digital inputs is just going to say whether the pin is high or low. Analog input is going to give you a range of values, how much sunlight is falling, how much current is flowing, how much voltage we are given, battery voltage, etc. So this lets you do a lot more things also. There are many different protocols. These are hardware protocols, UART, etc. that you can use on a microcontroller. All right. Right. So in a nutshell, what's an embedded system? It's a combination of actuators and sensors connected to a microcontroller, which is running certain code. All right. And since we are talking IoT, I'm going to add one more component there, communication. Because a microcontroller is going to talk to something else, connected things exchanging data with other things, you need to add one more thing there along with all the other embedded stuff is communication. All right. Great. What we'll do next is I have two demos for you to show, give some simple examples of embedded systems. These are not just random examples. We will be using exactly the same examples when we start talking about MQTT or when we start talking about connecting these microcontroller to the cloud. These are exactly the pieces of embedded code we will use to show the more advanced demonstrations. All right. Okay, so let's talk about embedded code. Is there a question? No, I think it's background noise. Thank you. Right. So let's talk about embedded code for a minute. Embedded code is a little different from if you have done C programming, if you have done any other kind of programming. Embedded code is a little different from that, not in terms of syntax or language. Most of embedded code worldwide today uses C program, okay? And it doesn't go to advanced C. As I said, I want to educate people to do IoT without being dependent on code. So we are not going to talk of things like linked list or RAM allocation and everything. Embedded code is very simple compared to other bits of code, but there's a major difference. If you're writing a regular A plus B equal to C kind of program in C, you will have a void main program and you will write everything in there. Embedded code, no matter what kind of microcontroller it is, and no matter what language you are using, always have two routines at least. One of them is called setup and the other is called loop. Now, setup is executed just once. Let's say you are doing programming over this microcontroller. All right, let's say you have a simple thing like a blinking light. Okay, so you are going to give power to this microcontroller. As soon as it gets power, it's going to look for a routine called setup, which will define what the different pins are doing. In this one, we are defining pin number 13 as an output pin. All right, so this is stuff that needs to be done just once. Now, once this setup is done, unlike another program which will execute the void main and quit, a microcontroller never quits. It'll keep running the loop method infinitely until you take the power away from the microcontroller. So on a technical front, this is another major difference between how you write program for a desktop versus how you write programs for embedded systems. Once again, the moment you give this microcontroller power, it's going to look for a routine called setup. It'll execute that routine once. It'll go on to loop and it'll execute the loop routine infinitely until you take the power away. So it'll keep blinking. So what this code does very simply is digital write pin number 13 becomes high. You give it 3 volts. You stop for one second, 1000 milliseconds. Then you give it low. So the light goes off and then you wait again for 1000 milliseconds and then you repeat this cycle. So the effect that we see as users is 1 second on, 1 second off blinking program. Whereas internally it's the loop program being run indefinitely. All right. And this is how no matter what program you use, no matter what microcontroller you use, embedded code will always have these two things. Now, there are a lot of nicer platforms coming. You are getting to see something called MicroPython now. So you can port a Python program onto a microcontroller, and that also will require some similar mechanism. All right. Cool. So this is about what all goes into making an embedded system. We just looked at the code bits. Now, where do we write this code? I think one of the most popular, and I'm not just saying from an education perspective, even from a commercial perspective, the most popular platform to write embedded code is Arduino IDE. All right. It is free. It is open source. It's very simple to use. We'll be using the same one for our demonstrations in these sessions. There are other platforms also that people have started using. For me, this happens to be the simplest to learn and to use. So if you're just getting started with microcontroller IoT, I would definitely recommend Arduino IDE. All right. Right. So let's take a look at, I've just shown you the structure of a code. Let's write a very simple Blink program and run it on our microcontroller. All right. This is just the beginning. Exactly same code we are right now doing by code. The same piece of functionality we will achieve through IoT. That's why I want to start with the small bit. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to do a simple Blink program. And I'll show you how to program this using an Arduino IDE. Now, although the name of the IDE is Arduino, it can be used for a very wide variety of boards. So this board is not an Arduino board, but we will use Arduino IDE to program this one. Okay. So follow me, folks. What I'm going to do is this. Let me show you my device camera once again. I'm going to take out all the other components we had put before, and I'm just going to keep a microcontroller there. Okay. The microcontroller we are using for our practicals is the Node MCU. This is the most popular IoT platform. This is a development board. Once the development is done, we have a production variant of the same board. I'm holding it up to the camera here. Much smaller. It doesn't have any of the fancy voltage regulator bits, but this is much smaller, much cheaper, much more effectively deployed in vehicles, behind your switchboards, in factories, etc. So this is the production variant. Where we'll be doing all the demonstrations is the development board here, which is called Node MCU. Okay, so if you can look at my second camera, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to close my presentation for one bit. The next 10 minutes we'll be just doing the practical. All right, so I've just opened my Arduino IDE and it has a lot of ready-made examples. I'm going to go to File and I'm going to click on Blink example. You can go to Examples, go to Basics, go to Blink. And as they say in embedded code, if you can get an LED to blink, half your job is done because everything else is just coding, right? So what you do in the Blink program, I will show you here. Exactly the program I showed you. There's a built-in LED on top of your chip. So if you look at your camera, there's a built-in LED here, the blinking light. First thing we should do is just try and make that blink. So built-in LED is number 13 pin. In setup, which will be executed just once, we say assign this pin number 13 as an output pin. That means I'm going to feed it voltage. All right, just that much, nothing more. Then you loop. What do you do in a loop? Make this pin high, wait for 1 second, make this pin low, wait for 1 second. But since this is already blinking, right, and you might feel that it's a ready-made code, so let me change the parameter so you can see the change happening on the microcontroller. I'm going to say, I'm going to reduce half a second. Okay. Yeah, that's all right. So first and foremost, I will compile this, and this is a little different experience than writing desktop programs because you can actually see what all is happening on the microcontroller. All right. While the program loads, how I'm feeding program to the microcontroller is there's a USB data cable that goes from the controller all the way to my computer. All right, this needs to be a data cable, not just a power cable. Let's bring it back. All right, first time you compile it, it tends to take slightly longer because it loads a lot of dependencies. If there are questions in the meantime, while the program compiles, you can just put it out in the chat box and we'll answer it while we are waiting for a couple of minutes. So because it takes a couple of times every time we change, right? Next time onwards, I'm going to have a pre-packaged code for you. I'll show you the code and I will show you directly running. But at least the first example, I want to show you with how it compiles and how it loads. All right. So as you can see, the program is now compiled. It will show you exact metrics. This kind of thing you don't get to see on a desktop. When you are doing embedded programming, you are much closer to the microcontroller, to the machine, and you can kind of request all the different kinds of metrics. So this code consumes 24%. Now you might wonder that, you know, there's nothing in this code. There are like 20 lines of code and it's 24% of program. Yes, because a microcontroller memory is not like our computer memory. You'll probably have 1 KB or 5 or, you know, 16 KB or 64 KB of memory on your microcontroller. So not having MBs and GBs of memory. So code is compiled. Now what you do is you select this is a node MCU. And then you say deploy. COM port is there. COM port is 3. This is the serial port on which the program is going to be uploaded. And then you say upload. You can see when I hover here, there's a slight text appears there which says upload the code. So this is where the code gets transmitted. Now you can see it happening when the light starts blinking very fast. That's the RxTX happening. So there's real-time serial communication happening from the computer onto the microcontroller. And here you can see the progress. Okay, as you can see now, it has half a second on and 1 second off. All right, that's the change we had made to the program. So practically this is the entire thing you want to do to change, to upload code to your controller. You can do whatever you like here. You can control motors, you can talk to your cloud, you can talk to your mobile phone over Bluetooth. All of that will change the code. But the process to upload that changed code to the microcontroller remains exactly what I have showed you. Okay, first step is we make the code. It should have setup as well as loop. Next step, we compile the code to make sure it's fine. Third step, we upload it through the data cable. It will get uploaded onto your microcontroller. All right, this is exactly how Arduino works. This is exactly how Pi board works. This is exactly how Node MCU works. All right, so you can keep changing it. Let's do one thing. This is an onboard LED, right? So let's change this a little bit. Let's now put our own LED here. Okay, so instead of built-in LED, which one is a good pin, Yogesh? D4. Okay, if you recall, or if you look at the microcontroller, the pins are also designated by names. So you can see D1, D2, D3, D4 for each of the digital pins. Okay.
So by pin diagram.
Pin diagram. Yeah, I do have a pin diagram. So I'm just putting up the pin diagram again. I'm going to attach an external LED to pin number D4 here. All right, so that we'll get a taste of how to attach an outside actuator. Okay, Yogesh, can you attach it for me? Yeah. Through the 3.3 volt resistor, 3.3 ohms resistor. So we don't want to use the inbuilt LED anymore. We are going to connect it to D4 pin through a resistor. So the positive lead goes to D4, the negative lead goes to the ground pin of the microcontroller.
Yeah, it reverse also.
If it's a inverted pin, then reverse. Yeah. Right. Okay. And while Yogesh connects the LED, I'm going to change the pin number to D4 because that's the new pin we are writing it to. Everything else remains the same. Save it. Compile it. So what we have done is we have twisted the resistor around the LED itself, so we don't have to put it in too many different terminals on the breadboard. All right, this is D4.
D4.
Oh, D4 itself is connected to the onboard LED.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So that's how we connect, be it a motor, be it a relay, be it some other kind of sensor. This is the kind of thing that we normally do, right?
Yes.
Now, I have one more demo for you today, which is much more interesting and much more aligned with the IoT way of doing things. We are going to put another sensor here, which tells us distance of an obstacle. Okay, this is very commonly used in many industrial IoT applications, also in many security applications, right? Before that, let me see if I plan to cover anything else before I show you the last demo. Analog we'll cover when we are doing some of our IoT stuff. All right, so this is the final demo for today, folks, with which we will stop talking only about embedded. So this is the last bit on the embedded building block, the edge layer. Okay, this point onwards, from tomorrow onwards, what we'll do is talk about embedded in the context of an IoT solution, not just something that only runs on a microcontroller. Okay, but this is a very common appliance, so I did want to show you the embedded half of this kind of sensor. So this is an ultrasound sensor. There are two cylinders here. When you activate the sensor, one of the cylinders sends out a pulse or a sound wave. All right, and the other one receives that sound wave. The echo. Can we put background on mute? Can we put everybody on mute? So I have the privilege to do that here.
Sir, you need to unmute.
All right, great. Thank you. So one of the cylinders is a transmitter, the other is a receiver. The transmitter sends out a pulse of sound. The receiver becomes high when the pulse echo comes back. And that's all that the sensor does. The sensor doesn't care what it's being used for. It's the microcontroller which figures out how many milliseconds have elapsed from the transmitted pulse to the echo, uses the speed of sound and finds out how far away the obstacle is. All right, that's all that that this embedded system does. Okay, so this is a visual representation. You activate the transmit pin, the pulse goes out, comes back from the obstacle. That's the end of the story for the sensor. Now the job of the microcontroller begins, figure out the number of microseconds elapsed and tell us the distance. Okay, so we are going to pin it up this way. There's a trigger pin and echo pin. The moment you activate D1, the trigger goes out. Whenever echo comes back, D2 becomes high. VCC and ground, this is a very common feature. All sensors, most sensors are going to need some external voltage also. All right. Can you attach that device here, Yogesh, while I walk everybody through the code? Yeah. Do this, attach it to a power bank. Let's also demonstrate that it doesn't have to be connected to a computer. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the code for this particular thing.
Show distance.
Sorry?
How to show distance?
Oh, show, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool, no problem. Connect it here. All right, so very quickly I'm going to walk you through the code. See, don't worry about the code, friends. All the code I'm going to make available. We have it on our GitHub repository. I don't want us, as people who are learning IoT, I don't want us to worry about learning code. Code is always going to be available to you. Our job is to architect it and design it in a way that we can build the solution. So never worry about code. I will make all this code available to you. So let's see what this particular code works like. Again, we are defining, there's a trigger pin and an echo pin and variables for measuring duration and measuring distance. Setup, to remind you, gets executed only once. We are telling the device that your trig pin is output and echo pin is input. Trig is the transmitter, echo is the receiver. There's something called serial.begin. Now, we have not spoken yet. How do we know what's the output? If it's a blinking light, the LED tells us. If you're going to get a number, where do we display the number? So at times you need to connect it to the computer's display. That is why we are giving it a baud rate, 9600 bits per second. Okay, That's the end of the setup routine. In the loop, repeatedly, your sensor is going to send out pulses, receive pulses, measure the distance, and show it on the screen. All right. For example, this is an inverted input. You give a low pulse of 2 microseconds to the transmitter, end the pulse, wait 10 microseconds, wait for the echo pulse to come in. Then you have the duration in microseconds, that what was the number of microseconds between the pulse and the echo. Using speed of sound formula, you find out the distance in centimeters and simply print it. Okay, I'm going to upload it already, right?
Yeah.
All right. So how do you see when we say that we are initiating a serial console, or when we say that I'm printing something on the serial console? Where is the serial console? So if you go to the top right of the screen, there's this little icon like a magnifying glass. You click here and your serial console will be activated. Let it come up. So the serial console is directly talking to your RX TX pins of the microcontroller. This is what it is looking like. Okay, so I'm going to put up both your things side by side. This is the microcontroller. With the sensor. All right, and this is the distance it's gonna show. So I'm keeping my hand very close. It is showing 3 centimeters. As I take my hand away and away and away, it will keep showing me more and more distances, right? So in real time, I'm using a sensor connected to a microcontroller and some embedded code to show me what is the distance to the nearest obstacle. All right. Now this is pretty simple. This is entirely an embedded system. This is not IoT yet. This is the edge part of the IoT system. Give me 2 minutes and I'll explain you what becomes different in an IoT system. All right. Right. So I think this is a good demonstration of simple embedded systems which are running on a breadboard. So it's a development board, not a production or prototype board. Let me go back to our deck now. Right. So what all we have seen so far, we have seen how to build simple circuits on breadboard. How do we simulate online so that we can do these kind of things even virtually. Then we said, OK, now just breadboarding is not enough. I want to do some more complicated stuff. I want more processing. I want sensors. So we brought in a microcontroller. All right. We attached certain sensors to the microcontroller and we gave its output to the screen. OK, all this is embedded. Fine, it will work fine. Now, if you want this device, let's say if obstacle is 10 centimeters away, you want another machine to stop. For example, if we talk M to M, we get this use case quite a few times that we have forklifts moving in our shop floor and there are people moving in our shop floor and we don't want people and forklifts to collide because people generally lose that fight with forklifts. All right. So what we want is we want a distributed system. We don't want everything sitting on the same chip. There is an embedded system on the forklift. As soon as it gets a signal, a radio signal, a fiber optic signal, some sort of signal that there are people within 10 feet of the forklift, you want the forklift to stop. Now that cannot be accomplished purely by an embedded system. That is a prime example where we have a thing talking to another thing. The first thing may be infrared sensors on the shop floor. It could even be a camera which is keeping an eye on where all the people are. The second thing is sitting on a forklift, and each of these in isolation is an embedded device, very much like the one we have just seen. We have just done half of it by figuring out how far away is the nearest obstacle, right? But now you need to take that data and tell another device that my job was to tell you whenever something is close, I have done my job. And now it's your job to do something else. And this is where we start getting into the IoT space, right? Where we have embedded things talking to embedded things or embedded things talking to virtual things like databases or websites, or embedded things starting to talk to people through their mobile phones. Any of these requires embedded is not enough. We need to expand our scope and get into Internet of Things. All right. So this is what we'll be talking about from tomorrow onwards. I think for today, the scope, we have finished the scope of about embedded. Tomorrow, before we go on to the cloud aspects, we have just seen prototyping, okay, to get the thing working. But from the prototyping, how do you get to a commercially produced IoT device like this? All this is embedded. We have not gone anywhere near cloud yet. First session tomorrow is going to be how do we convert this kind of a prototype to this kind of a fully furnished, fully functional, tested commercial IoT device. That will be the first session tomorrow. Okay, with that, I will thank everybody and I will take questions. So, Patel sir, I'll hand it back to you.
Okay, thank you, Abhijit. Participants, if you have any questions, you can ask.
Sir, myself Rajat from AVIT Chennai, sir.
Yes, sir. Tell me.
Sir, one small. I worked in Tinkercad and Arduino also a little bit, but I have some small doubt. Can you guide today or after the classes? I have to ask later.
If you can ask me a question now, if it is relevant to this broader FDP, I'll answer it right now. Otherwise, we can touch base afterwards.
Actually, today you didn't cover that. I thought to wait for tomorrow or day after tomorrow section, because after loading the program to the we can say that is your Arduino board, we are going to copy the data and all this thing. After uploading that one, we can execute that one, we can run that one with the help of the system, right, sir?
Yeah.
But after that, when we are going to execute for real time, each and every time we need that USB connection, or we can use this one for any power cable so that it can get the power and we can use for real time operating system.
That's an excellent question, sir. And I'm glad I asked you here, because this will benefit everybody. So let me do this. I think my screen is still shared. So I'm going to go back to the Blink program. Is this running?
Yeah.
All right. So once I upload this program, I'm going to move to a smaller breadboard here. And why is that data cable required? Because we are trying to communicate serially with the microcontroller. Okay. Once the program is uploaded, there is no dependency that the microcontroller has on the computer except for power needs. All right. So I'll just show you, once the Blink program is already uploaded here, I'll take it away from my computer. I'll take a regular power bank and I'll just connect it. All right. So now, as you can see, there is no connection between computer and the microcontroller. It is working on its own. As long as it continues to get 3 volts power, it will continue working. Now, when I want to change the program, I have to again connect it, because I'm talking about serial communication now. All right.
See it, sir. We could not see it.
Oh, I am showing it on my camera. Can you look at my camera feed?
Yeah, actually, I think it's taking a lot of time to load. Maybe that's why we are not able to see.
No worries. Let me put it up on the alternate camera.
The switch.
No, let me put it up on the alternate camera. You'll see it on the screen. Okay. So what I'm showing you is there is this power bank.
Yeah.
All right. Clear now? Visible?
Yeah, it's visible now, sir.
All right. There's this power bank. There is controller, and there is no third entity into this system. Because once the program is uploaded, the only thing the controller needs is continuous power to work. It doesn't require anything else. All right. Now, in this case, I am feeding power through a power bank. And this is, to be honest, to answer the original question, this chip is too big to be embedded into a real-time system. This is a development board. It has a lot of other things going for it. It has USB controllers to load the program. It has a voltage regulator to make sure it doesn't get burnt out, etc., etc., etc. What we really put out there in production systems is, let me show it to you, is the production variant. So it is the rectangle of nickel is exactly the same thing. Everything else that we see here is a support circuit, okay, which is not there on the production. To the production chip, all that you first upload code to it, and then you just give it voltage, and it will keep working without dependence on it. How do we do that? For that, you need some kind of a PCB. Okay, so in this PCB, as you can see, all that you have to do is put the chip onto the designed PCB. It is already having all the wiring required to take voltage 3 volts from the voltage regulator to the power pin of the IC, and that's how you put things in the real world. So just to wrap up this answer in a short form again, what we have seen is a development board. It is great for building systems. It is great for learning. It is great for live proving that your solution works. But this chip is too big and too expensive to make in the thousands and put in people's vehicles and washing machines and behind their switchboards. What we do is once development is done, you take exactly that chip and put it into what is called a production chip. The production chip requires a customized PCB. All right. And this is the stuff we'll be talking about tomorrow, that how do you get from this kind of prototype solution to this kind of production worthy solution. That is, we are having a complete 90-minute session on it tomorrow. Answer the question, sir?
Board, sir. Sir, board name, sir.
Oh, so this entire thing is a ESP8266 family of chips. The development board is called a Node MCU. The production variant is called an ESP12F. I will share all this material with the wider.
Maybe you are going to take a day after tomorrow or something else. We'll see that. No problem, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you,
tomorrow,
sir.
Tomorrow morning we'll take it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you a lot.
Sure. More questions?
Okay, Abhijit, there is no more question, it seems, from other participants.
All right.
We'll wind up this session. Thank you, Abhijit, again for this nice session. I have just now shared a form which contains some MCQs, 10 MCQs based on today's session. So all the participants are requested to take out some 10 minutes time and answer these questions and submit the form. Okay, there is no weightage for this MCQ, but then these MCQs will help you as a material for you for the final examination. Thank you.
If you do have questions, send them to me on these coordinates. And what I'll do is I'll take the first couple of minutes tomorrow to answer these questions, and then we will move on with the rest of the thing. All right. So thanks, everyone.
Can you call me later on? I'm in a meeting.